Alrighty, hello everyone. We are back for another RV talk without the RV in the guest house, and we are with a really cool person, and I'm glad that you get to hear from him. His name is Nigel Parker. I know him from UNC Chapel Hill. He wears a lot of hats. He's absolutely exceptional. I'm going to have him introduce himself, sort of speak to some of the roles that he has in UNC, but then also some of the roles that he is taking on over the summer. But absolutely phenomenal person. I'm glad that we get to speak with him today.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Nigel Parker. As Chris said, I'm a rising senior at UNC Chapel Hill, where I study management and society, which is like sociology and economics, with a minor in history and a minor in PPE, so philosophy, politics, and economics. Like Chris said, yeah, I wear a lot of hats. One of those hats is as a Hakeem scholar at UNC, so that's a large part of my experience there. And in that, I run a speaker series that we call Food for Thought, where we bring in different speakers that talk about their sort of area of expertise, and then we give them sort of equal time to speak as well as answer questions. And so that's been a sort of passion project of mine that I've worked on at UNC. Also involved in student government. So right now the chief of staff for the current student government administration. I'm also an Agora fellow, which is part of the program for public discourse. A lot of the stuff that I've been involved in at UNC revolves around civic discourse, public discourse, and how people can engage in these really difficult topics across difference.
And he's being humble. He is, if I can call it, the father of discourse at UNC Chapel Hill.
That's a crazy character.
No, I mean he does great work around discourse. You're a Balter fellow as well.
That's right. Yeah, I was a Balter fellow through the philosophy department. So I did a research project on sort of the morality of civic discourse. So yeah, I'm very involved in like civic engagement, civic discourse, basically.
Yeah, and so we're really happy to be with him. Want you to speak to what you're doing this summer. Where do you find yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So this summer, I am an intern through the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. It's an amazing program. Was recommended to me by our friend Jalea, and it's been an amazing process. They prepared me so well just going into the Hill. I think the Hill, there's no other sort of internship like interning on the Hill. It's very fast paced, and every person's experience is different. So I was placed in Hakeem Jeffries' office, the Democratic leader in the House, on the House side, and so I'm working in his executive office more so. On the things that he does as the leader of the Democratic caucus. So that's been a really amazing experience, a really unique experience, one that I really didn't think I would get going in. They just sort of assigned me to that office, and so I really think it's the best fit for me, and it's been an amazing summer so far. Yeah.
And so one if I ask any questions that you can't answer because of some sort of law or whatever, just feel free to flick me or just say no, I'm not answering that. But my first question is how your perspective has sort of changed in existing in this space on the Hill with the Congressional Black Caucus, and specifically in Hakeem Jeffries' office. He's the Democratic minority leader of the House.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very interesting actually being sort of in the space where the sausage gets made. Like, I think there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of things that people like view about what goes on in Congress. Some of it is very true, right? Some of it is very valid. There's certainly
such as what?
Like the sort of theatrics of it all.
Okay.
And people playing up personalities, and it's been interesting to see the behind the scenes of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Is that like an oh wow moment? Like that actually happens?
Yes.
Like the movies are not lying.
Yeah, a little bit, because I'll go to hearings, and sometimes I just go not even to take notes or on assignment, just to listen. And you'll see as soon as the cameras are on, people are like in character. And it's very interesting to see how the politics play out that way, especially because we're in an election year and everyone's playing to their voter base. But it's been really interesting. You can sort of see through who's being genuine and who actually cares about the issue at hand, and who is just trying to play to their base, as I said. So it's been interesting. But it's been interesting to juxtapose that with sort of the more grassroots organizing that I have been experienced with, going back to high school. And seeing what actually makes a difference, like what are the things that actually get through to members of Congress, has been interesting. And some of that is disappointing. So things like a lot of the times, things you're asking for have to be attached to money, right? And that's what people come to those conclusions outside of that, and you can sort of have that perspective outside of it. But seeing it happen, like seeing stakeholder meetings or even just conversations between members and the different topics and policy areas that they're interested in pursuing, it really does have to be attached to money. And some of that is a bit disheartening, but it's just realistic. There's just a certain level of reality that hits you when you come into the Hill and you're in those spaces.
Has it in any way, and we were getting into this a little bit off camera, has it in any way sort of wanted you to go more towards politics or away from it?
Yeah.
And what type of role are you?
Yeah,
are you the politician or, the public servant?
The public servant.
Or are you behind the scenes?
It has been interesting to try to figure that out. There's a lot of, like in DC, you have every type of, influential organization. So the Hill is obviously the federal one, but then there's all these nonprofits that come in and lobbyists that come in from the corporate side. But I'd say I've really enjoyed seeing like the inner workings of an office. Like the outside, the public sees the face of the member and their name. But seeing like the 20, 30, 40 people that are behind just that one, press appearance or, speech or whatever it is, or a policy definitely, that's been like really interesting to see who are the people that are actually getting the work done and actually providing the member with that guidance of like where to go. And so that's been more interesting to me, that side of it. Although it is, a little bit, like I said, some of it is disheartening and some of it it's like, I don't know if I really want to compromise my values to be in this space. Not that you necessarily have to do that, but I think, again, that reality piece that there's certain things that you have to be in that space. And so I think being a part of that is something I want to do. I'm still in the process of figuring out, like, does that mean I'm a chief of staff? Does that mean I'm a legislative director or, some other sort of senior staff position? Or do I want to be the person that the team is around? And it's been interesting to try to figure that out.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm, for one, excited to see what ultimately comes from that decision. Either way, I'll be bugging you for years to come, whether you like it or not. So I'm happy to do that. I want to switch a little bit to the 2024 election cycle and voting in general. And we have, as you know, been traveling coast to coast. It feels like it's been years on the road, and I'm tired of it. I want to go to my bed, but we're almost done. This is the last stop, and so we've been hearing a lot from a lot of different individuals of all ages, all demographics, all backgrounds about how there's not good options for the presidential election, and that's always the big topic, not necessarily the state or the local. And I'm curious as to where you fall in all of that.
Yeah, the options are not great. I think the 2020 race was so different than this race. I think the line was much more clear for people, although we had to, still very, very much older, people running. The values and sort of the aftershock of the Trump administration, I think made it much more clear for people. And so now it is difficult. It's more difficult, obviously, you talk about Israel-Palestine and that complicating things. And so that sort of muddies the water. But I think for me, it's still a very clear choice. I think it's still, I understand the people talking about, not wanting the lesser of two evils or something better but not necessarily good or things like that. But I think at the end of the day, the democratic process works because you participate in it. I think it only works in your favor that way. And if you sort of choose to bow out of it, that is sort of an omission of your right, your civic duty, regardless of how it plays out. At least for me, I'll speak from my experience. If at the end of the day it doesn't go the way that I want it to, at least I can say I engaged. I was a part of it. played a role and cast my vote, made my voice heard in whatever small way that a vote can be your voice.
And a lot of other things that we've been hearing are, this is the most critical election of our time. What do you say to that?
It feels like that every 4 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think, from 2016 on, the introduction of Trump has definitely heightened that feeling, just because of the sort of undeniable rise in extremism and extreme ideology and people sort of being more out in the open about how they view the world, how they view other people and their politics. So I think any year is very important. Any election, federal down to local, very important for you to engage and take that civic duty seriously. I think this election, though, is pretty important. I don't know how it gets more important than this. If you're thinking about individuals' rights, the fact that we're involved, to whatever degree in multiple international conflicts, and then thinking about the people that are suffering here, the people that need help here and have needed help for decades, that haven't gotten that because of all the politics and funding and corporate influence and lobbying and stuff. So I think that the candidates couldn't be more different, and I think that I hesitate to paint them in the same light. I think I've seen that a good bit of people saying that this is the same. You're choosing between the same sort of thing.
I heard was a TikTok that said they're both qualified to bring about the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, so that is a similarity that I think that they are both qualified. I think I don't know that. Just speaking from me, my initial view and still view that I have of Joe Biden is that at the end of the day, he is a good person.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen that, being in the Hill, you can see like the theatrics and things like that. But you can sort of see through that with him. I think he's a very earnest individual, very genuine and wants to do the right thing, wants to get things right. But again, as you were saying, from that TikTok, there's significant ways that a president can restrict rights, can incite violence, can really steer the country in the wrong way and misrepresent the people of America. I don't know that Joe Biden would necessarily do that on just about every issue, but I think it's undeniable that would happen for the other candidate. So it's difficult, and we can talk about the Israel-Palestine thing. That's sort of been hinting at that.
Because you mentioned good person, but you have that juxtaposed with genocide Joe.
That's right. And I think that it is important for voters and for the American people to be extremely critical of their commander-in-chief, the president. I think that it is our duty as citizens to do that, and to hold them accountable in that way. And so I, in no way am saying like people should stop doing that. I think that is for, in a perfect world, right? Biden is president, and we do that harder, like we do that more, and keep pushing that agenda. Just from my perspective, I don't see a way that any sort of pressure or influence or organizing would get through to a Trump. And so for that reason, again, I don't think that they could be more different. I think we have to go blue here in the selection, but I do think that there is significant accountability to hold Biden to. And I don't know, it's a difficult issue, right? Like I don't think people in our generation sort of want change very quickly. And myself, I get very annoyed with people from older generations saying like it takes time and all these things.
They come from the long suffering,
yeah,
steadfast generation.
Yeah, exactly.
We shall overcome.
Sure. But I think that urgency is real and is needed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of our energy is needed in the space now.
Mm-hmm.
There's constant cries for people of our generation to pour into these political systems, because if we're not there, we know who is, and we know what that brings, and so it really does hurt me sometimes when, with the Israel-Palestine issue in particular, people are trending towards opting out or trending towards abandoning our government, our democratic system, and this idea of a broken system is never going to fix the problem, or that the master's tools will never undo their crimes. I think that's real, and I think that is sort of an energizing thing that speaks to a very personal experience of these policies and how they are enacted. But I think at the end of the day, some of that reality that, go back to the beginning, some of that reality of being on the Hill is that you have to be there. Like, if you're not there speaking about these things, then it just gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even has a historical, backing that in the past, nothing changed because the same people were in the room.
Mm-hmm.
It took people kicking in the door, making a way, bringing a chair, finding a way to get at the table, and making an impact once they get there. So, I don't know. It is a very difficult issue, and I hesitate to critique my peers on how they choose to engage, because I think that at the end of the day, how you engage is your prerogative, and I think it's your decision. I just am worried about people not engaging at all. I want people to be present.
When you say how they engage, does that assume that no matter what they do, they are also voting? Is that sort of like the bare minimum you need to vote?
Yeah, voting is a very clear cut, you're engaging or you're not.
Yeah. Because I can present the argument that if you're making all the noise in the world, you're protesting, you're making phone calls, all that stuff, but then we look at your voting record and you're not voting, and then you're like, oh, you make some sort of excuse, it could be anything in the world,
right? Then
you're not engaging in a meaningful way,
right?
You're not investing.
Yeah, no, that is I think sort of my hot take is I think voting should be mandatory. I think you should have to vote. To the same way you pay taxes. I think you should have to do that.
Hold up, so you're saying do you think we should pay taxes too?
I think we should. We have to contribute to the common good. But I think we should have to vote. I think that there should be an option to, I like the no preference option of, different primaries and things like that, and you can write in, you can do whatever. But I think it is extremely important to participate. And voting is one of the things where it's pretty black and white. Where did you cast your ballot or not?
So if that's the case, I'm just exploring this for a second.
Sure.
What is the consequence for not voting if it's mandatory?
So I've had this conversation with other people. There are other countries, I think it's Australia, that has it's not necessarily you have to cast a ballot, but you have to show up to the polls. You have to register that you were there.
Present.
Right, exactly. But they have a very high voter turnout because of that, and I think that it might be some fine or something like that if you don't.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily about the consequences; it's more so about building that into the culture of America. And if we're going to be the leaders of democracy worldwide, we want to ensure that we're having the most civic engagement. That is sort of the cornerstone of democracy. So that's sort of how I view it.
And if I can shift to, I guess, actually this is all fun, but less political centric question.
Sure.
You've been in D.C. You grew up in the DMV area though. You're from,
Yeah, I'm from Baltimore.
Baltimore have a great governor right now.
Yeah.
But curious as to why D.C. has been so good, so amazing. What have you gotten into that's been so cool?
DC is an amazing like energy. Sometimes it's a little artificial.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think someone was talking about the differences between New York and DC, and they were saying how New York is like how it actually is to live in a city. Like it's dirty and like people everywhere. And DC seems like they've made it up to be like this. I don't know, like a TV show type of city, which in some ways I enjoy. In some ways I like that.
Like an escape, like a Hallmark Channel movie.
Yeah, it's a similar way that like San Francisco is sort of like a grown-up playground with like all the technology and everything. I really enjoy DC. I really like the energy. Everyone's going somewhere on some business, doing something. The brunch is amazing. I was talking earlier off camera about just coming from a brunch. Food options are great. Just the thing is the price, man. That's the only thing. The cost of living here is insane.
It's funny because in going coast to coast, it's just like there's time zones. There's price zones.
Yeah, sure.
Especially California.
Sure. Oh man,
$6 for gas. That RV. It's also a mirror. It probably is best that it was left in California because the gas is crazy. But yeah, that's really really cool to hear. What has been one of your favorite memories so far during your time in the summer?
Yeah. I hate to go back to the Hill, but and more politics stuff, but I think it has been really, really fulfilling to watch members of Congress that represent a constituency operate, like watch how they do their jobs. I remember being in a hearing, it was an oversight committee hearing recently on, it was about like racial discrimination in the workplace, but that sounds good on the outside, but it was brought by the Republican majority in the House, so it had a very different tint to it, and the Democrats could only bring one witness, and the rest were members from like the Claremont Institute and other sort of conservative think tanks. But I saw Maxwell Frost speak, and he's the first Gen Z member of Congress and the youngest member of Congress, of course. I think he's 27 or something like that.
27.
I could be wrong. You could tell me on that, but very young. And I had never heard him speak before, but I was sitting first or second row, and just watching him, consult with his chief of staff, get his notes together. He came in like with his AirPods, like he was in the zone, and to hear him deliver his 5-minute address on the matter, that was just really inspiring to me. Just to see a person of that stature that's not too far from me, looks like me, is wearing a suit just like I was, and sitting not too far from me, that thinking that could that be me one day. So that inspiration, I think, has been the best experience.
And I'm gonna close it out with one last question. How would you define a healthy democracy?
How would I define a healthy democracy?
And you can take this wherever you want.
Yeah, that's a big
because it's pretty broad.
Yeah. I found myself thinking about relating, like, this sort of gets to the civic discourse stuff a little bit. Relating the rules of civic discourse and the way that we engage in discourse to the like marketplace of ideas. That's like an old analogy that's been used, but really thinking about like economic models for how to think about a healthy democracy. And one of the things that is talked about a lot in economics is just sort of letting the market exist and allowing for that information to come in. If it's crashing, if it's doing well, if there's inequality, like that is all information to be used. And so drawing that analogy to sort of people living together, I think if there's crime, if there's protest, if people are really well educated in one space or really well off in one space, all of this is information. And a healthy democracy like takes all that in, has all the mechanisms to take that in, and then respond accordingly. But I think the response piece is the most important. I think we do a lot of information gathering as a country, as a world. We do a lot of data analysis and thinking about even this, not even sort of quantitative, but like the spectacle of protest or civil disobedience, things like that. I've seen that on our own campus. But the response, the way that we come up with those responses, I think is the real sign of the health, the well-being of our democracy. Because if we're not responding to anything, we have to be responding to our people and how they're existing. And it doesn't necessarily mean grand changes in our system or grand changes in our policy, but that we are addressing these issues, all this information from all these different ways of existing in America. How we respond to those things, I think, is the real telltale.
Thank you. I told you all it would be a treat. A lot of wisdom. One thing I've always appreciated about Nigel, and I say it all the time, he is a thinker, and he is a leader that I'm excited to continue to see growing and serving a constituency near you. Sorry. But thank you so much, Nigel. Really appreciate it. And we're really excited for what you have done already at UNC, what you're continuing to do in all of these spaces that you exist in.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me. This is great.
Of course.